Okay, hello and welcome to today, day 2 of Harper McLeod's Marine Economy Week. Today we're going to be focusing on ports and harbours, and more specifically diversification of those and what's happening at one particular site in the north of Scotland. My name's Chris Kerr and I head up our Marine Economy team at Harper McLeod. I'm delighted you've been able to join us for the session today. I'm also delighted that we are joined by Jonathan Milne, who is the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Haventus. Hi, Jonathan.
Chris, hi. How are you? Hi, Ewan.
Thanks for joining us. And also Ewan Perry, who is one of my partners and heads up our major projects and infrastructure team at Harper McLeod. So, good afternoon, Ewan.
Afternoon.
Thank you. And so I suppose the question, we have focused in the past and as part of our Marine Economy Weeks on ports and harbours. And I suppose just to put it into context, why is that important in the context of Scotland and Scotland's GDP? So there are about 11,500 miles of coastline in Scotland. There are over 200 ports and harbours. And I think what's not an exaggeration is that we're seeing more and more headlines associated with activity at a lot of the main ports in particular, which is focused largely on diversification of those assets, whether it be from a leisure perspective and cruise liner numbers, whether it be from an economic regeneration perspective, or whether it be in the case of Ardersier Port, that Haventus operates, kind of large-scale industrial regeneration of what were brownfield assets. So just as I said, I'm delighted that we've got Jonathan with us. Jonathan, the Ardersier story has been capturing lots of people's attention and lots of imagination, not least because there was a generation before us that started, I guess, some of their work lives and some of their kind of journeys into offshore at what was the McDermott Yard, Ardersier. I think I'm right in saying when it opened in 1972 or thereby, at its peak, it was constructing jackets and offshore modules with about 4,500 of a staff. So how does that compare to what's out your window at the moment?
Yeah, no, you're right, Chris, to highlight the McDermott's Yard left a terrific legacy, fondly remembered by many people who still live near the site. We don't have 4,500 people at the moment because, of course, we're in development phase. But what we're trying to do is continue the energy story at the site, only this time for the transition to a lower carbon generation era. So the site's being established really as a facility that's dedicated to offshore wind deployment. And also Ardersier's great advantage is it's a very, very large land area. So the site's capable of providing storage and marshalling facilities at significant scale for offshore wind developers, but also we believe it's capable of providing, manufacturing and assembly capacity, again at scale, for the manufacture of offshore wind-related components. And if we look at the difference that can make to the regional economy, and harking back to the McDermott's days, is that manufacturing and assembly activity that will be, we hope, a big driver of new job opportunities for the region. Storage and marshalling clearly creates opportunities as well, but when we're talking about very large numbers of jobs, it's manufacturing and assembly that's going to drive that.
So just putting this into context for our viewers, then there's have I got it right? There's about 450 acres out of your window of site, and how many people have you got working on the site, and what are they doing at the moment?
So looking out the window today, Chris, we've got between 450 to 500 people working on the site. Essentially, the first phase of redevelopment at Ardersier, and we call it Ardersier Energy Transition Facility. It is, of course, a port. It's got a gate to the sea and a gate to the road. But because it's largely dedicated to offshore wind deployment, we call it an energy transition facility internally. The two main deliverables between now and getting the port open, which we hope will be in the second half of 2025, are first, we're constructing around 700 metres of new quaywall and associated quayside. So that's progressing very well at the moment. We're hoping that actually will be complete in the coming weeks. And then when we get into the first quarter of 2025, towards the end of the first quarter, we're hoping that we will have what's called a capital dredge campaign, which will see the channel, the harbour approach channel dredged and the inner harbour dredged to around about 12.5 metres, which gives us the depth and the width that is needed to bring in the vessels that will be carrying the offshore wind components. So if you take those two main project deliverables together, that's what we need to get the port open in the second half of 2025 and begin operations.
No mean feat. You in last year's Marine Economy Week, you spoke to a client at Orkney Islands for whom you're doing some work. In terms of the redevelopment or regeneration of the port in that part of the world, what does that look like in terms of scale compared to what's going on at Ardersier?
It's the same but different, in that one of the features of that development is a very large wet storage area. So when you deal with ports and harbours, as Jonathan has indicated, there's an importance for layout areas which are land-based to keep these very large components that are required to develop these farms. Wet storage is actually a very useful facility for a floating wind in particular because it floats. So the opportunity at Scapa, which is a natural harbour before it's enhanced with a new quayside, is as a large protected natural environment where, in addition to that, they are obviously, as part of that development, looking to create quayside and land-based as well. But it's very well placed for wet storage, which is storage of these component parts within the water. So it's very similar objectives. It's trying to service the offshore wind sector in the same way as Haventus, but from a slightly different basis and obviously a slightly further north location. So same but different would be my conclusion there, Chris.
You alluded there, Jonathan, to the kind of statutory consents and the different bodies you need to deal with. How has that process been from the Ardersier perspective?
It's been very positive, actually, Chris. And I guess we approached the consenting process very much in listening mode and with a degree of humility. Most of the team has come from an energy background rather than a ports background, although we clearly have ports expertise in the team. And I guess the key message that we were very aware of from the outset was the quality of application is absolutely fundamental. So we tried very hard to understand what the components are of a quality application. Our interaction with statutory consultees and the regulator, I have to say, have been very, very positive. And we feel, I guess I would describe the regulatory approach has been what I'd call guiding. So from our point of view, it's worked very, very well. We've got to where we want to be in the project delivery and the schedule without the feeling that regulation or consenting has in any way held it up. It's actually been a pretty positive experience. And you know, regulators have a very important job to do, which needs to be respected. And from our point of view, we've worked hard to give them what they need to make the decisions that they need to make. So, yeah, I can't say anything other than it's been a very positive experience so far, and which is credit to the regulators and the statutory consultees.
Really encouraging to hear. It's good.
And so one of the things that I think brought Ardesir to the headlines, or Haventus's acquisition of Ardesir, was the Quantum Equity Partners investment in the site. So just these are, as I understand it, Jonathan, these are the owners of, or the principal investors in Haventus. And this is principally American money, and the headline figures that hit the press were £300 million was available and or being deployed in the site, which was followed then on by Scottish National Investment Bank and UK Infrastructure Bank. So great news for the Highlands, great news for bringing the brownfield facility back to life after such a long time. Has that has the attention that the story has grabbed, has that been of a surprise, or was that always kind of expected in part?
I think Quantum's investment is very significant, Chris. So actually, an inward investment, which is effectively hundreds of millions of pounds, I think you recognise it's going to grab attention, and especially in the Highlands, I guess. But that's been obviously hugely beneficial to the development. I mean, this wouldn't be happening without Quantum support. They're a very supportive investor with a very, very good team. I think if setting aside what they're doing at Ardesir, I think what's gone alongside the investment is it's brought attention on the potential of the Highlands in general as an offshore renewables hub, actually, which should be a benefit for all the many good ports in the area, not least Port of Cromarty, Port of Nigg, terrific ports, Port of Inverness, our Inverness and Cromarty first being Freeport kind of sister ports, and I think it's created a buzz about what's possible here and what could be, what will be coming. It's not a case of if, but when, and the fact that an investor as credible as Quantum has chosen to make the investment they have, I think is something everyone should feel very excited about.
We've had our office now in the Highlands for 20 years this year, and I would say that over that 20 years, there's been certain big news stories that have caught the headlines, but you could probably remember them on the fingers of one hand. But to a man or woman, that I would say everyone is now talking about the Green Freeport and about the opportunity which that brings. I'm just surprised we got this far into the conversation before you mentioned the Green Freeport. So Ewan's been doing quite a bit of work with the Green Freeport. Ewan, do you want to just jump in there and just remind everybody where we're at on that story?
Yeah, we were instructed tail end of 2023 to assist in the first instance with the establishment of the tax site delivery agreements. These and Haventus and Ardesir are one of the tax sites within the Green Freeport. There are 10 in total. And those sites, the intention of national and Scottish government is to create an environment that's optimised for development of critical infrastructure delivery assets. So the sites carry certain well-publicised tax breaks. There are LBTT, or stamp duty as it's known by some people, breaks for new development. There are accelerated capital allowances, claims abilities, and one of the really fundamental ones for the companies locating into a tax site is a non-domestic rates relief. And the whole idea is to stimulate and encourage the port development is absolutely critical to delivering offshore wind and delivering net zero aspirations. So the Green Freeport is doing that. Personally, my role was to prepare those agreements, assist the Green Freeport in putting them in place. We were up against a really hard deadline because there was a date, and it's UK level designating legislation, and getting movement in parliamentary timetables in Westminster is not for the faint-hearted. So we knew we had a hard date we had to achieve. Through very, very collaborative working with the partners, again, including Aventus and Ardesir, I have to say there was a very clear understanding of why those agreements were being put in place, and a very pragmatic and sensible approach to agreeing them. So we managed to achieve that. We got all the agreements in place within the requisite timescales, and indeed now we're in the process, obviously, of those agreements being operated as additional operators are coming in. The Sumitomo factory being the very obvious one, where there were 3 different tax sites involved in that. And we had to enter into deeds of adherence to vary that. So very much a contractual setup of the governance and operating documents that helps the Green Freeport run. Those tax site agreements provide revenue into the Green Freeport that allow it to act autonomously, which is obviously really important when you want to be an enabler in the way that Callum and his team want to be doing. So been delighted to be involved in that. We're looking forward to providing ongoing support and helping the Green Freeport help deliver its statutory objectives. So, yep, a good process for all involved.
And I think I've got it right that the Ardesir site was it kind of joined into Green Freeport in the latter stages, because probably partly because Aventus weren't the owner prior to that. But
yeah.
Is that something, Jonathan, that from a strategic kind of win point of view that you see as being really important to be part of?
I think absolutely. Agree with everything Ewan said. It's of tremendous value to inward investors, and certain types of inward investors particularly, as well as the tax benefits. I think what it creates, Chris, is a calling card for the region. I hate to use the word brand, but it creates a pretty powerful centrifugal force for what the region can do. The fact it's a centre of excellence for offshore renewables and heavy manufacturing related to offshore renewables. I really do think it's important, and I think if you speak to potential inward investors, they would say the same. It's a real magnet for them to choose potentially this part of Europe than elsewhere. And make no mistake, we're in competition with other parts of Europe for this business.
Yeah. And tuning tack slightly, we talked earlier about job numbers and the job creation that is likely to come from there being large scale construction project like this. How have you found you can't talk about any large scale project without talking about jobs, skills, housing. So how is that side of the part of the jigsaw going for you?
Well, at the moment we're in development phase. We're essentially constructing. So by its nature, that won't last forever. So we've got a workforce that's made up of partly locals, but the main contractors also have their own teams that tend to follow the job. I think once you get beyond that and you're into operations phase and you're having, let's hope, very large tenants developing facilities here, then of course it's a challenge, but everyone needs to see it as a very positive challenge and an opportunity. There's going to be fantastic routes for apprentices. There are going to be fantastic routes for people wanting to have a career change. The ramp up phase of how you get from zero to potentially thousands of jobs is going to have to be carefully thought through. But I know government in Scotland, government in the UK, the skills agencies are looking at that extremely carefully so that the right minds are looking at it. And I also think the types of businesses that we believe will be attracted to the area, it's not the first time they've done this. They'll have very clear ideas of how they want to come in and do it. They'll have extremely robust internal training programs and an understanding of how to build a workforce. But it's the Highlands. We all accept that levels of employment in the Highlands are pretty high, which is ordinarily a very good thing. It's going to require careful thought, but I think what we're talking about here is a long-term business. It's not something that's going to come and go within 5 to 10 years. There's going to be, probably a 20-year build-out phase, probably well beyond. There's going to be other markets to service, and there's going to be a lot of follow-on work from that as well, because things don't last long in the North Sea. They're going to have to be brought back on shore at some point. They're going to have to be serviced. There's going to be, a big O&M business behind that. So people need to see this as a career, not just a job, and actually a very, very rewarding career where they can take different steps and have lots of different job routes from highly skilled labour to finance to really skilled engineering, AI. It really is a pretty exciting new frontier for skills, in my view.
Yeah, very, very exciting. And I know that there's a whole load of follow-on conversations going on about the different models that can be applied for provision of accommodation and such like. So I think whatever optic you put on it at the moment, it seems like there's a lot of solutions being sought, but in what is overly used term, but in quite a collaborative way in terms of the different stakeholders in the north. Ewan, just in terms of sharing any other thoughts around some of the other port facilities or infrastructure projects you're currently involved with, is there anything to kind of learn from those in the context of the jobs, skills, accommodation side?
Yeah, I think it's in order to capture the opportunity, in order to have these people working, the things you've already touched on need to happen. And to an extent, the operators themselves can only do so much towards that. So the availability of accommodation, you've touched on that needs to be delivered, and it will be delivered by government predominantly or by government facilitation, as will the skills programme. So there's things that people who have aspiration to come here, they can be as accommodating and welcoming and can pay people as much as they can afford and do all the things they can do to encourage that workforce. But there is a job of work to be done by the political arms here, and the local council could not be more supportive. I think it's fair to say. In terms of just the process of developing port infrastructure, Aventus have been in a very strong and very fortunate position because of the level of investment, equity investment that Jonathan has alluded to. And that's rare, and it enables Aventus to move at pace. Financing marine infrastructure is difficult. It's expensive. It's constructing in a marine environment is even more challenging than constructing on land. It's by definition, you can't see the seabed very easily. It is concealed. Conditions can be unexpected. And I've described to clients I'm discussing with this, you are delivering intergenerational infrastructure, 75, 80-year infrastructure, and paying for that over a short period of time is difficult. But if it isn't done, and it isn't done in a good way, then the delivery of the net zero transition is going to be compromised, because we need more and good quality ports and harbours to do all the things Jonathan has mentioned, the initial construction of these offshore wind farms, and then the long-term servicing of them. It simply has to happen. So it's understanding those risks. It's contracting for them in a sensible and balanced way with a good quality contractor who can deliver and is of a scale and size that can stand behind some of the important risks they're asked to take. It's finding a good way to finance those opportunities that is sustainable, and it's keeping all of that on track. And that's the process that we go through. We help our clients to do that. But it's difficult and it's challenging, and it's all about thinking about it and getting it right first time when you can. The other one that remains to play out, the other big string in the bow of the Green Freeport is the customs site aspect. Perhaps not in absolute fiscal terms as important as the tax site benefits, but clearly could be another string to your bow if you were contemplating seeking that status, and that's still to be allocated within the Green Freeport. Any thinking on that, how that might fit into the Aventus story?
Yeah, I think to your point, Ewan, it's an ease of doing business point, actually, isn't it? The customs site, which can clearly be attractive to tenants potentially. So it's something that we're definitely looking at to fully understand who it might benefit. And of course, people that are importing large volumes of material, that's I guess the one big advantage to potentially gain custom site status. So we're very well aware of it, taking a look at it, and we'll ensure that tenants, as conversations progress with potential customers, it's something that we can pursue it on their behalf. Absolutely.
So a simplicity of operation type play from that perspective, maybe. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Sounds sensible. And I get, as I say, still to be allocated, so all up for grabs.
Definitely, but another advantage.
I suppose just one point that struck me as you were talking earlier, Jonathan, was that in talking about the history of the Port of Ardersier, it was a US engineering business, McDermott, that kind of kicked it all off, as we said earlier. But it hadn't dawned on me that, of course, we've come full circle, and it's principally American money that has restarted this thing. So is that adding to, I mean, anecdotally, I can say that as someone who spends a lot of their time in the islands, and particularly in Inverness, there's a lot of foreign visitors, both business and leisure. But would you say that the American interest has led of itself to the international audience taking note of what's going on, either as part of this kind of green revolution or the port itself or the Green Freeport?
Yeah, I'm almost certain that it has, Chris. And Quantum Capital Group's reputation within the energy industry globally is they're a very, very well respected investor. So there's no doubt it would have caught the attention of others who play in that market. It's interesting you say American interest last week. It probably ages me, but somebody mentioned the analogy of local hero. So in terms of energy, but I think that there's no doubt Quantum's investment has been noticed, outside America and Europe. They've made a commitment in anticipation of a market coming, which I think is extremely bold of them doing that. But they've not done that without doing their homework. They've got hugely strong conviction in this market, and they're prepared to be patient to an extent. But it takes people to go first, and they've gone first with this equity investment on a site that there's very few sites like this in the UK and Europe. And I think the guys from Quantum have been quick to understand that and how important it will be to the offshore wind market.
Yeah. Well, we'll need to have you back for next year's Marine Economy Week then, and you can tell us where we'll be. We'll be at October 25. So all being well, the gates should be open.
Will be an open facility by then, Chris. You can guarantee it.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Jonathan. Ewan, thank you also for your time. I can't sign off without making a plug for what's going on for the rest of the week. So day 4, we have Claire Mack, the Chief Exec of Scottish Renewables, talking to one of Ewan's, or one of the partners of Ewan and I, Ashley Fleming. They're going to be focusing in on one of the areas that come up in our conversation on skills challenges in the offshore renewables sector. It's also a good opportunity to remind you of the Green Freeport report that we published on the back of last year's Marine Economy Week, which to a large extent is still very topical. There's on the website, you will find detail also of the insights and events that we've got coming up. One of the ones that we've got a report on is just the recent Green Freeport event we did with Prosper in Edinburgh. And we've also later this week got 2 further things coming up: offshore renewables sector discussion taking place between one of our partners and our clients, and also a piece on vessel finance and where that market's at the moment. You can see yesterday's discussion, which was a year in review of 2024 and what's been going on in the marine economy world. That's also on the website, and you can sign up for any of the other events at the website too. Meantime, thank you very much for your attention. Hope you enjoyed that, and I certainly did. Thanks. Bye-bye.